Hi, welcome back. My name is Kevin Zdrill. I'm the host of this podcast about the book All Eyes on Me, a true story of addiction, recovery, and hope. And with me today, I have Vincent, Lilly. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Going great. Good to have you back again, Vincent, on our podcast. Always very enlightening in terms of the ideas that you give us and the life's journeys that you've gone through. Today, we're going to focus on gangs and more so your thoughts and suggestions for families and kids and signs to look for, but just your general thoughts in terms of what the attraction could possibly be, often for younger kids that get pulled into gangs.
What's the attraction?
Yeah, so often we hear about kids that get influenced into them, and from your perspective, what you've seen and growing up and so forth, what is sort of the pull that often the kids get pulled into it?
I think nowadays it's a lot different from when I was younger. It seems like there's definitely a big change in the the attitude and the things that the kids are learning these days. They're learning a lot of stuff from social media and all that kind of stuff, and so I think it's a big difference. But ultimately, I think it obviously starts at home with the kids, and obviously, if they don't have a dad or something like that, or they have older brothers, that's going to influence the type of behavior that they want to put themselves around, I think.
And you've done quite a few presentations within schools. What's sort of the message that you would give to kids in terms of the downside to being influenced into gangs?
I think it just teaches you a lot of bad behaviors. A lot of the times, obviously, like I said, we're all good people. We all start off good people, but as we go through life, we pick up these things that we learn. And so some of the things that the gangs and that could teach you might not be all that great for you. The behaviors and slang words and just like that kind of stuff. It's kind of it can cause you to allow yourself to be dragged into a direction that you probably don't want to be in.
Mm-hmm. And really, the influence can start at really young ages.
I think nowadays it's like around between probably could start at age 10, I think, nowadays.
Wow, that's amazing. So for parents, that's definitely an eye opener to realize that grade 5, the influence is already there for the children.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, like kids these days, it's different because when I was growing up, there wasn't really social media. There wasn't this thing that you could turn on and look at and get influenced by. So a lot of kids are seeing a lot of things that they're mimicking nowadays on social media or whatever, right? And they don't even have to have per se a gang member in the family or someone that they've seen in public. It's even just right there in front of them in their own house, right? They have this TikTok app, and sometimes there's people on there that are wearing gang colors or doing stuff on there that they see and they think it's cool and they start to mimic, right?
Mm-hmm. You mentioned within the book that keeping kids busy, keeping them active, is often number one strategy to have them avoid being influenced.
Yeah, definitely. You don't want to have kids that are bored in their lives, that don't have any sort of hobbies or anything like that. Then once you have that, then it's easy for the excitement to get to them when it comes to like the gangs or like the group things that happen within groups, groups of kids and that, what they do and their behaviors and that. It's easy for them to get influenced into that. If you can get them into sports, is probably a good one for kids, for young men. Good to get them into sports, because then it'll give them that thing to be excited about, to get themselves into, and it's a distraction from all the other stuff.
So how important is community centers in, within our communities? Obviously, that's going to be the starting point.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I guess it could go both ways, but I mean, it depends on the kind of staff that you have working at your group, at your community centers. Because yeah, again, I think the staff at the community centers need to be aware of the gang stuff and all that too, because those are the areas where the kids are going to be probably showing more of the behaviors than they do at home, because it's a situation where they can act more themselves and just be whoever they want to be when they're at these places.
Mm-hmm. I guess in terms of schools, even within schools, having extracurricular activities, keeping them engaged, that's going to be a really important role that the schools themselves are going to play.
Yeah, for sure. Kids obviously build relationships with teachers and all that kind of stuff as well. And so, yeah, when it comes to the gang activities and all that kind of stuff, sometimes kids can be distracted from that. And so, yeah, that can be bad for them if they don't have that.
Definitely. And in terms of parents, what can they do, especially newcomers? It's a new city, it's a new community. What's been your messages to them?
About the new communities?
Yeah, they can do to help with kids and influence.
I think definitely just try and just keep them family orientated. Again, like you're mentioning about the sports and that, it's definitely good to try and get them into something like that they can look forward to, and something they can get a passion for. Because yeah, when it comes to sports and stuff, kids when they're younger is when they develop those real passions for sports, and they can just keep pushing themselves further and further into it.
Yeah, and like you said, role modeling is a huge part. Positive influences, and certain people just have a better influence on kids. But that's going to be a big part of it, isn't it? In terms of who they're associating with the adults.
Oh yeah, definitely. And when they don't have someone really that they look up to in their household, then that's when they're going to even drift even more away from home and into the public and try and find somebody out there. And there's always going to be those older male figures, I think, nowadays, that might catch your attention and might draw you in.
With your work, being a mentor and working with youths, what's been sort of your techniques relating to them and having them trust you? What's been sort of your approach with these kids?
Well, you definitely just want to be yourself, and you just want to try and understand them, where they're coming from, first and foremost. Because I mean, you definitely don't want to be jumping in there, starting trying to tell them what to do and what they should do, what they shouldn't do. You just basically just talk to them like you would any of your friends, a good friend, and just try and get to know them, and before you start to really give them any sort of advice.
So that's building up that level of trust. That's really the starting point.
Yeah, for sure.
In terms of working with parents, are there things that the parents can do within their own household?
I think like one of the most important things for the parents to do is definitely make sure they focus on building that relationship with them, and trying not to do things that I'm afraid to have to talk to you, and that's when I'm also looking for someone to connect with.
So that connection is going to be really important for family, and that really starts at the earliest of ages to build that connection with their children.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You said in the book it's, even not sheltering children, but let them experience life around them, and life on the communities and on the streets, because sheltering them almost does um, a detriment in terms of their awareness, in terms of the realities of the world around them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in my opinion, as much as you don't want your kids to go through any sort of trouble in life, you honestly almost have to let them go through it in order for them to truly feel life and appreciate it the way that it is, because pain is part of life and you kind of have to embrace it.
And that really is the exposure of seeing the realities of the populations around us, and so that they're more prepared and they have I think a better understanding, as you mentioned in the book, an appreciation in terms of um, what's out there and what the expectations are when they become more independent as young adults.
Yeah, and I think they'll do a lot better as young adults, having going through um, some some incidents as they're young, when they're younger, like going through it and having to make those decisions in their mind on how to react to it on their own. If you shelter them too much, then they won't even have any of those incidents happen to them when they're younger. And then when they do happen when they're young adults, they won't know what to do.
So maybe a tricky question would be, and in your own situation, you had two much older brothers, and then yourself and your other brother. What could a parent do if they're seeing that the older siblings are going in that direction, uh, criminal intents and so forth, to try to ground the younger siblings in a family? Because there's often that bridge in time, and I think it's probably a common crossroads that a lot of families face nowadays.
I think again, you want to just be present. You want to be there and let them know that you're there, and just try and give them advice and try and guide them. You don't want to try and tell them what to do, in my opinion. Like, you don't want to try and force them too much, like say like grounding them or anything like that, for doing things that they shouldn't be doing, because they're just going to create that wedge in between. And like the way kids are, I know for sure that like they just rebel against any sort of thing like that. So you want to kind of just let them know you're there, and you definitely don't want to react in anger towards these mistakes that they make, because ultimately kids are going to make mistakes.
And as you mentioned in the book, that big part of that is that communication, is having them trust you to you be the one to tell what's going on in their lives versus other friends.
And I've just I started it a little while ago with my kids, and just teaching them that it's okay to make mistakes, and like that's how we learn, right? And that's how we grow. And so I think it's really good to start that, because I think in the past, with the way families were, they used to teach kids that you're supposed to be perfect, right? You don't want to make any sort of mistakes, and that's really unrealistic, right? Because then kids are afraid to make mistakes when they're going to make mistakes no matter how perfect you are anyway.
Yeah, so there is that level of forgiveness, and like you said, life is a learning process. So for the kids too, they're learning, and you want to be there for that learning journey.
Yeah. Say it's a learning process, and that's just it. When you say learning involves mistakes. The more mistakes that you make is the better you get. So I found it a better way to teach your kids, because then they don't have to worry so much about every little thing that they do.
And I guess, as you mentioned, with social media, that's a big influence now. Kids have access to and what they're experiencing, what their maybe new reality of the world is. Is there anything as parents that we could do that could help kind of reel some of that stuff in so that it's not really their main go-to?
I think ultimately we're in control of that, because we all know social media and that is an addiction. So the more that you let them do it, the harder it's going to be for you to control it as they get older. And so basically in the beginning, how you want them to be with it, they will be. So if you allow them on it every single day as much as they want, then that's going to become an addiction for them. And if you limit it, that'll be what they know. They'll know what it is that you allow them to do.
And that's an important part. I think parents sometimes have guilt that they don't allow their kids enough time on that, but ultimately, really, that should be a structured part of the day. And it kind of reverts back to what you said earlier, getting them involved in activities, sports, other areas of interest where it keeps their minds focused and their bodies healthy.
Well, I think they're saying nowadays, a lot of kids, they spend like 30 minutes to 40 minutes exercising and 7 to 8 hours on watching their devices. So it's like, yeah, it's just like, and you can't even be hard on your kids for saying, hey, you're just always staring at that, because we allow them to do it, right?
Mm-hmm. Or we're doing it ourselves too. I mean, that's, we got to lead by example, don't we?
Yeah, that too.
Any other takeaways you like to have, any insight for this topic that kind of comes to mind that you could provide for our listeners?
I think the biggest thing, I think, is just to, you want to try and be mindful with how you behave with your kids at home. Obviously, that's where everything starts. If the kids, I'm not saying that if the kid's living in a good home that there's no chance he'll ever get involved in a gang, but it is less likely to happen if you are giving them a good life at home. But I think you want to just focus on, to be very understanding for them, and just being open and honest with them. I think that's the most important thing, is to try and build a good relationship with them where they feel like they can talk to you about anything.
And I guess that's keeping in mind too that not everyone has equal home life. There are kids that are going hungry every day at home. There are kids that there's experiencing violence within their household. So they have a lot of just baggage thrown at them every day that they got to deal with. Never mind then having to go to school and try to focus.
Yeah, that's just it. People don't know. You can't. That's why they say you judge a book by its cover, right? Because you honestly don't know what somebody's going through. You never know what one person to the next is going through in their. And that's why I like the idea of making the stickers that I make, and I put them all over the city with the positive quotes, because the truth of the matter is, you don't know how much effect you can have on someone's day with just a few words, positive words, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, never take it for granted.
Exactly. We do that too much these days.
Yeah, I think especially nowadays, we're all looking for as much support as we can, some inspiration, and I think that your messages is certainly a big part of that, trying to provide that for individuals and families and communities. I know that you're continuing your work to bring that forward, and we're looking forward to our upcoming podcast to further your message. And from your book, All Eyes on Me, we're very proud as the host of this podcast to be able to sit down with you each week and hear more of your insightful thoughts. Thanks very much, Vincent.
Welcome. I appreciate it.